World War I, the Great War, the war to end all wars. We all know the story, right? The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo, a tangled web of alliances, and a continent stumbling into a catastrophic conflict that claimed millions of lives. But what if I told you that the official story, the one you learned in school, is just the surface? What if the real triggers were pulled not on the streets of Sarajevo, but in the quiet, opulent boardrooms of the world's most powerful banks? Today, we're diving deep into the hidden history of World War I, exploring a controversial but compelling theory that a small, elite group of international bankers didn't just profit from the war, they actively engineered it. This isn't a conspiracy theory from the dark corners of the internet. It's a narrative pieced together from historical records, congressional testimonies, and the writings of respected historians who dared to look beyond the headlines. So, grab your notebooks, because history is about to get a lot more interesting. To understand this, we need to go back to the early 1900s. The world was a chessboard, and the major players were Great Britain, Germany, France, and a rapidly rising America. At the heart of global finance was a network of immensely powerful banking dynasties. Names like Rothschild, Morgan, Warburg, and Rockefeller weren't just bankers. They were kingmakers, their influence stretching across oceans and national borders. Their primary goal wasn't allegiance to a country, but allegiance to profit. And nothing, historically, has been more profitable than war. Let's look at the situation in America. In 1910, a secret meeting took place on Jekyll Island, off the coast of Georgia. The attendees were a who's who of American finance, representing J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers, and European banking interests like the Rothschilds and Warburgs. Officially, they were on a duck hunt. In reality, they were drafting the legislation that would become the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. This act created a central banking system. The Federal Reserve, which effectively gave a private consortium of bankers control over the nation's money supply. They could print money, set interest rates, and, most importantly, finance a war on a scale never before seen. Professor Carroll Quigley, a respected historian from Georgetown University, wrote about this in his book Tragedy and Hope, stating their aim was nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. With the financial mechanism in place, the stage was set. But why war? By the early 20th century, the world was largely carved up by the British and French empires. Germany, a burgeoning industrial powerhouse, was a major economic rival. Germany's Made in Germany quality was outcompeting British goods, and its plans for a Berlin to Baghdad railway threatened to create a trade route that bypassed British-controlled sea lanes and the Suez Canal. This was a direct threat to the financial dominance of the London-based banking establishment. Germany had to be stopped. The political climate was a powder keg, a complex system of alliances, the Triple Entente of Britain, France, and Russia, versus the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, meant any small spark could ignite the whole of Europe. The bankers, with their deep connections to politicians and media outlets on all sides, were perfectly positioned to fan the flames. Influential newspapers, many owned or financed by these same banking interests, began a relentless campaign of propaganda, painting Germany as a militaristic aggressor and whipping up nationalistic fervor. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in June 1914, it was the perfect pretext. History shows that Austria-Hungary's response to Serbia was deliberately harsh. With encouragement from powers that wanted to see the conflict escalate, the international financiers saw their opportunity. A European war would shatter Germany's economic rise and force all warring nations to borrow astronomical sums of money to fund their war efforts. And who would be lending that money? The very same international bankers. It was the ultimate business plan. In the United States, President Woodrow Wilson was elected in 1916 on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." The American public was overwhelmingly against getting involved in a European conflict. But behind the scenes, a powerful lobby was pushing for war. J.P. Morgan & Co. had been appointed as the purchasing agent for both Britain and France, managing over $3 billion in supplies. If the Allies lost, Morgan and his syndicate of banks stood to lose a fortune in loans. They needed America to enter the war to ensure an Allied victory and protect their investments. The propaganda machine went into overdrive. The sinking of the Lusitania in 1915 was a key turning point. While presented as a barbaric attack on a helpless passenger ship, it's now known that the ship was carrying munitions for the British war effort, making it a legitimate military target under the rules of war at the time. This crucial detail was deliberately hidden from the American public. Then came the Zimmermann telegram in 1917, a supposed secret message from Germany to Mexico proposing a military alliance. The telegram's timely interception and publication fueled outrage and pushed America over the edge. On April 6, 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. The war was a financial bonanza. The U.S. national debt skyrocketed from $1 billion to $25 billion. This debt was owed, with interest, to the bankers who had lobbied for the war and controlled the Federal Reserve. The war also reshaped the global financial landscape, shattered the old European empires, and left Great Britain deeply in debt. The United States, and specifically the Wall Street bankers who had funded the victory, emerged as the world's undisputed economic superpower and primary creditor. J.P. Morgan and his associates not only saved their loans, but also consolidated immense power. After the war, at the Paris Peace Conference, these same financial interests were there to dictate the terms. The Treaty of Versailles imposed crippling reparations on Germany, ensuring the country would remain in debt and economic turmoil for decades, a situation that would directly lead to the rise of extremism and, ultimately, a Second World War. The bankers had not only started and profited from the war, but they also laid the groundwork for the next one. So, was the assassination of an archduke the cause of World War I? Or was it merely the match that lit a fuse that was carefully laid, funded, and fanned by a small group of financiers who saw global conflict not as a tragedy, but as the business opportunity of a lifetime? When you follow the money, a different picture of history emerges. A picture where the destinies of nations are decided not on the battlefield, but in the bank. It's a sobering reminder that the most powerful forces shaping our world often operate in the shadows, far from the public eye. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the hidden history of World War I. If you found this fascinating, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the stories you were never told. Let us know in the comments what you think about this version of events. See you in the next video.